This is Franchise Today, brought to you by FRM Solutions, providers of the best-in-class software solutions for franchise relationship management. Franchise Today is your destination for weekly information, conversations, and interviews with accomplished industry leaders, all of whom share best practices for sustainable growth and sensible franchising. Here now, your host, Stan Friedman, to kick off this week's podcast.
Today is Wednesday, September 25th, 2024. I'm Stan Friedman, and this is a very special edition of Franchise Today. Very special because this week I'll be doing something I've never really done before. I'll be bringing you excerpts of me being interviewed on yet another podcast. That's right. This week, yours truly is featured on the 9th episode of Tracy Panase and Shannon Wilburn's brand spanking new podcast, The Franchise Leaders Forum. And with their permission, I thought, how cool would it be to not just share the news here about me being featured on their new pod, and that you'd hopefully give a listen to it, but to bring the meat of that interview right here, where you can actually get a taste of what the two of them are up to while we flip the script, if you will, with me as the interviewee this week as opposed to the status quo. This also gives you a chance to learn a bit more about my storied career, which started in broadcast, and how that led to some 36 subsequent years in franchising. But let me begin by telling you a bit about Shannon Wilburn and Tracy Panase and their backstory. These are two amazing women in franchise leadership. You see, a little more than 20 years ago, Shannon co-founded Just Between Friends, which today has become a wildly successful children's clothing pop-up resale franchise concept operating more than 150 locations across 30-plus states. Among other honors in her storied career, Shannon was recently honored by the IFA as the recipient of the prestigious Bonnie Levine Award, which recognizes exceptional women in franchising who also inspire others and contribute to society through their outstanding accomplishments. Well, that brings me to Tracy, who actually personifies the merits of Shannon receiving the Bonnie Levine Award. You see, Tracy was actually one of Shannon's early-stage franchisees, who, as a multi-unit franchisee, operated 4 territories in southern Pennsylvania, consistently achieving recognition as a top performer within the Just Between Friends network. So much so that Tracy actually went on to purchase the entire company from Shannon in 2022, and today serves as its CEO. To this day, Shannon continues on as an advisor and brand ambassador to Just Between Friends, and continues to mentor, coach, and support emerging franchisors at SMB Franchise Advisors and Shine Executive Coaching. A quick timeout here, but when I return in 2 minutes or less, the fun will begin. So don't go away.
Franchise Today will be right back, but first, a word from our sponsors.
We are all familiar with Vistage, YPO, and EO. Well, now comes Zor Forum, a somewhat similar type of executive group, but this one comes with a twist. Zor Forum groups are exclusively for franchisors. Imagine a peer group for sharing and networking on a platform built exclusively for franchise executives. Zor Forum members are afforded unparalleled access to best practices and some of the brightest minds within the franchising world through regular meetings and a dedicated communications platform. In this post-COVID world, a franchise-specific mastermind or peer group is an endeavor worth making time for. Zor Forum groups of 6 to 10 will bring leaders together that are in similar situations, but with exclusivity in terms of their competitive sets, so that each can openly help others benefit from their respective knowledge, perspective, and experience with no fear of competitive loss. Network, learn, strategize, and remain motivated along your journey. Join a peer group, not just any peer group. Join the only one designed for emerging franchisors. Join Zor Forum. Learn more at zorforum.com. That's www.zorforum.com. Okay, so now you understand why these two amazing women are perfectly paired as co-hosts of the Franchise Leaders Forum podcast, and why I'm so proud to introduce them to you and to simulcast the interview that they did with me right here. So, speaking of flipping the script, it's time to do just that, as Tracy and Shannon welcome me to their world. This was a ton of fun. Listen.
Hello and welcome to the Franchise Leaders Forum. I'm your host, Tracy Panase, and I am joined as always by our co-host, Shannon Wilburn. Hey, Shannon.
Hello, everyone. Glad to be here.
Yeah, we are excited to be back, and we are super thrilled to have a guest who really needs no introduction. Stan Friedman is joining us today. Hey, Stan, how are you?
Ladies, it's a pleasure to see you. Thanks for having me.
Yes, thanks for joining us. So as I said, one of the themes that I've realized, Stan, in preparation for this interview is that you're really passionate about emerging brands and just bringing franchisors together. And I can't wait to dive a little bit deeper into that. And as we were kind of talking before we hit record, I said that we haven't really met in person that often, but your voice is so familiar, probably to so many of our listeners, because Stan is the host of a podcast called Franchise Today, and it's in its 15th season. So,
yay. I've learned a lot on Stan's podcast.
I've been told by people who write to me that the only thing that they don't get listening to my podcast is CFP credit.
We might need to talk to the International Franchise Association about that. I think all of the certified franchise executives out there would love to have credit for your podcast.
Yeah, as somebody who just graduated from the CFE, I would totally advocate for that because we're always looking for different credits. So one of the things that listeners know that you always ask your guests, how did franchising find you? And so Shannon and I thought it might be a very appropriate way to start this podcast and flip the role and ask you, Stan, how did franchising find you?
Back in 1988, I was at my last radio job in Miami, Fort Lauderdale. I had a career in broadcast before franchising found me. And I did something in radio sales, broadcast sales, that was very noteworthy in that most people that were in sales were selling advertising, wanted to have big lists of accounts that are agencies, ad agencies. And they always struggle to get, the better agency list. That's where they're going to make the most money. I didn't want agency list. I didn't want to call on ad agencies. I wanted to call on car dealers because I learned through a program that the Radio Advertising Bureau provided us. I learned how to call on car dealers and get them to peel off some of the money that they would spend in print and give it to you for a radio budget. And then you would tell your listeners across multiple stations that you would place ads on. Watch for my ad in the Miami Herald. It may be a smaller ad or it may have given up a color in the ink, but now you've got tens of thousands of ears hearing commercials telling you to watch for the ad.
Wow, that's so smart. Oh my gosh.
Well, I made a fairly significant amount of money just calling on car dealers, and I learned how to manage the egos that are the egos of car dealers. I did some goofy stuff. I would show up on Monday mornings at a car dealership that I wanted to sell to and apply for a job in their sales department. And I know that at that Monday morning meeting, the dealer himself is there. They're looking at a new crop of potential salespeople. And so I'd show up and play the role of I'm interviewing for a job. And I would tell them then that I had a different agenda. And I think that they should spend 15 minutes with me talking about something much more important to them. In fact, talking to me about what we want to talk about, or I do, is going to help this new crop of salespeople make a lot more money because I'm going to bring a lot more foot traffic into your showrooms.
That's awesome.
And so I got discovered by somebody in the real estate franchising world who knew what I did in radio. And that person recruited me to take that kind of skill set and learn how to call on the second most egotistical lot of people in the professional world, real estate brokers, right behind car dealers. And my first job, I had to go through a 7-month or 8-month learning program to learn the lexicon of real estate. But my role was to be a franchise development person to convert independent large real estate brokers who in their marketplaces thought they were the franchise themselves. I'm the biggest gun in town. Well, my job was to come and dress them down a little bit and help them get a sense of their vulnerability and convince them that while they may be the biggest name in town, you're not the biggest name in the game because you don't have offices all over the world. My company does. And so that was my entree into franchising, was learning how to call on real estate brokers. And I succeeded at that the way I did in selling advertising to car dealers. In the first year, I cracked some of the largest real estate brokers who didn't want to listen before. I created enough pain to get their attention, and they ultimately bought franchises.
So just so I understand the transition that was being made, you were taking these independent sales agents who were just really killing it in their local market and then introducing introducing them to a national brand and making that transition independent to a franchise model?
Almost 100% correct. The agents are usually licensed to brokers.
Okay.
And the brokers are the ones who own the agency. And so my role was to go into these top tier agencies in any given market, the top 5 percentile that weren't already affiliated, and then present to them the opportunity to affiliate with our international brand in the case of ERA, Franchise Systems, or with Prudential, The Rock. I mean, what could be more powerful than the Prudential real estate affiliates? And so I had the clout of large organizations behind me, but I had the headwind of the largest egomaniacs in the world, people who thought I am the franchise. I made a $1,000 bet once with a guy named Harry Norman Realtors in Atlanta. Let's go to the Atlanta airport and you bring one of your little yard signs to the airport with us, and I'll bring an ERA sign, and you pick which escalator you want to stand in front of and how long you want to stand there. If more people know you than know me, I'll pay you $1,000, but if more people know me than you're going to pay me $15,000 and become a new ERA franchise broker here in the Atlanta marketplace. I had to do some crazy stuff to get attention, but my company supported that.
I don't know this side of you. Like, I feel like I've known you for a long time, but I did not know this. To me, those are some risky sales tactics, but they got the job done.
Yeah. It was tons of fun. I learned an awful lot of tricks from J. Conrad Levinson and guerrilla marketing. And literally, I did some crazy things. Flip charts. When you used to have a standing flip chart. Remember those days?
Yep.
Way too young. If I couldn't get through a gatekeeper to call on a broker, I would take a standing flip chart and I would take a really thick felt tip pen, one of the really thick ones, and I would take this page that I had it printed for me that was a replica of a receptionist pinky pad on the receptionist's desk while you were out. Remember those? And
yeah.
Yes.
And you get a message. So I had those printed the size of a standing flip chart page, and I would use the big thick felt tip. Stan Friedman from ERA called, and I checked the boxes. Wants to talk to you, wants you to call him. I have $1 million idea that can do this for your business. I need only 10 minutes to explain it to you. And I took that and had a lady that worked for me that did calligraphy, and I would have her do a hand calligraphed envelope with a gold foil. I figured out how to take that big flip chart page that I had printed like a message pad all the way down to the size it would fit inside of that gold foil envelope. And I mean, I'd press it with an iron, make it skinny thin. And I would send it to the broker at his office. Well, the receptionist wouldn't dare open that envelope. That envelope was personal. That went right to the broker's desk. Then the broker opened that envelope, and within 10 minutes of getting that envelope open, I knew my phone was going to ring. You're coming to work for me. You are coming to work for me.
How did you get from the real estate, into Tutor Doctor and your other franchise brands?
Great question. I spent the first many years in franchising in the insular world of real estate. I came and went from ERA once or twice to other places and returned again each time in a better place than I was at the time before. In 96 or 97, I was being given a forced choice to move to Dallas or have to give up my job. And I opted for the latter because a trip to Dallas with my wife had her in tears.
Oh,
She didn't care for Dallas compared to what we had in Atlanta. Hills, trees, it was a hard decision, but I had to make a change.
you had to appease the wife for sure.
Got to start there.
Yep.
And literally, I had an opportunity then to become affiliated with Blimpie Subs and Salads. And I was able to secure a role as National Franchise Development Director, which was my first position in mainstream franchising outside of real estate. And that was a great ride. I had a terrific time at Blimpie, still connected to some of those wonderful people that have been part of my life for 30 plus years now. And many of them are still active in franchising in other places as well. As you know, Shannon, I make this claim all the time. In this world of franchising, we collect people. We move from place to place. We change roles. We change positions, but we collect people. The shirts can change, but the people, not so much.
I think especially for those people, Stan, that, because I think there's thousands of people, right, in the franchising industry. And I am always surprised when I meet someone new in the franchising industry that has been involved in the franchising industry for a really long time and I've never met them, because I think most of the people that I know go to the International Franchise Association convention or they go to some of the smaller conferences that the IFA puts on or other industry conferences. Mm-hmm. And so if I meet someone and they say, yeah, I've been in franchising for 20 years, I'm like, how have I never met you? Because it feels like a small family, even though it's thousands and thousands of people.
We just had that conversation in the green room before we went live today, didn't we?
Yep.
I met somebody I should have known for a long, long time and just recently got introduced to Aisha Bastaro, the American Franchise Academy.
Yep.
And I feel like we are probably much tighter-knit and closer-knit organization of people as an association and a tight-knit membership of IFA. And so I say we still, like other people have 3 degrees of separation, you put a decimal point in front of that for our world. But even that notwithstanding, there are people that I'm humbled by the fact that I'm just meeting people that I should have known. I go on LinkedIn and I see 18 and 1900 people in common that they and I share. How is it possible not one of them made an introduction to each of us yet?
Yeah, you have lots of friends.
Yeah, the great thing about franchising is just the community within the community. And so as you look at the early part of your career, Stan, where you're introducing brokers to this opportunity to be a part of a national brand, and then you transitioned into Blimpie, what are some of the strategies that you honed? Obviously, a lot of sales and creativity. One of the things that I read about you is that you consider yourself to be an out-of-the-box thinker. How did that out-of-the-box thinking really propel the second phase of your franchising into Blimpie's, Wing Zone, Maggie Moo's, those types of brands?
Well, I think it really happened for me at Blimpie because I don't remember what the number was anymore, but we had 88 sub-franchisors. And of the 88 sub-franchisors, my role was to be in support to them and helping them reach their FranDev goals for the year. So I had a big, hairy, audacious goal number. I remember that. And I wasn't sure how I was going to get to it. I had a friend who taught me some things about tax credits in inner city development. And I learned that if a Blimpie store were to go into a federal empowerment zone and put its location inside the zone's geographic constraints and hire from within that zone, that franchisee could get $3,000 per hire in tax credits from the federal government. And some of the cities would put the entire outside facade, the cost of the outside facade of the building, on tax credits.
What year was that?
97.
Okay.
98. 97, 98. Well, I got the board of Blimpie to agree to give up to 10 or 15 franchises away, initial fees waived, if the owners of those franchises would put the franchise inside one of the federal empowerment zones. Well, guess who got a ton of headlines? Rush Limbaugh was talking about this on the radio. I mean, it was big. It got a lot of press. In the summer of 98, I got invited to the White House Conference for Community Empowerment, along with my CEO, Tony Konza, to spend the day with Clinton and Gore and talk about what it took to get inner city development cranking, how to get public-private sector relationships working and enabling those to happen and more of that to occur. And it was that work in those days that got me connected with what was then the Minorities and Franchising Committee for IFA, which later became the Diversity Institute, for which I became a founding board member. Those days were literally quite out of the box. Literally from that, though, came so many relationships and so many friends and so many people who have become a part of my life that I'd otherwise have never been introduced to for any other reason. And so I've always tried, the same as with the car dealers and the same with the wedding invitations, and making people think that this is goofy, this is going to be unorthodox. I learned from J. Conrad Levinson and from Guerrilla Marketing that you have to be a little unorthodox. We get assaulted every day by all kinds of messages and white noise, and you got to break through that clutter and stand apart. And if you don't do something that differentiates you, you don't even get a look, much less an opportunity. So those are the things that have always been a part of my toolbox.
What I think is even more impressive about what you just shared is the fact that in 1998, the early 2000s, there was no such thing as social media. So all of that publicity that you're generating was through the more non-traditional methods. How have you seen your business shift with the advent? Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, has any of that impacted some of the tactics that you use as you continue into franchising now in 2024?
I think that what hasn't changed is the mindset that you still have to stand apart. You still have to be something that stands away from the rest of the noise. And so the tactics may change because you're in a different genre, but the mentality remains the same. And in fact, to be honest with you, we've come almost full circle where today you can stand apart by actually putting a stamp on an envelope and mailing something again while everybody else is fighting for your attention online.
So true.
And think about this. Think about sending somebody a message in a handwritten note. And if you do this, again, this is goofy, but love it, print it twice. The first time, put it in the envelope just the way you would, fold it and put it in. Take the second copy and wad it up and then unwad it. Put a sticky note on it that says, don't throw this away again, and mail it again a day later.
I love it.
You know they threw the first one away.
Tracy's a big believer in the written word. That's one of the things when Tracy came into the brand, it was every franchise owner in our system, which we have over 150 in the Just Between Friends brand, if they had positive growth in their sales, they got a handwritten note from her. And I'm just in awe that she did that. Not only did they get a handwritten note, but they also got a bag of popcorn too. So I think the bag of popcorn I could have executed on, the handwritten note to everyone. And we had a really great year. So I think it was just about everyone who got a handwritten note. So she was doing a lot of handwriting.
That means a lot. It goes a long way. We're going to take a quick break here, and when we return, Shannon and Tracy are going to talk with me about Zorforum to wrap things up. Don't go away.
Franchise Today will be right back, but first, a word from our sponsors.
Franchise Today is brought to you by FRM Solutions, offering the only CRM tool built exclusively for franchising that lets you have it your way. Whether you're a single brand needing professional tools across departments or a portfolio of brands needing franchise-specific CRM across the enterprise. Either way, FRM satisfies the needs of many with the power of one. That's right, one single instance of FRM is all it takes across departments or across brands. So if you've had it with inflexible, one-size-fits-all CRM, end your frustration today. FRM offers robust dashboarding, tailored reporting, and with open APIs, FRM pushes, pulls, and integrates with other databases, providing you with a single source of truth. Don't just take my word for it. Visit them at frmsolutions.com and order up a demo today.
Well, I know we're kind of coming to the end, but we have not talked about Zorforum, and I want to talk about Zorforum. So, Stan, I can't remember where you and I met. Do you remember where we met?
I think I was at Wing Zone, and you were doing Just Between Friends, but I don't remember which event we met at.
Yeah.
But it was definitely through an IFA event, or it was MFB event. It was one of those.
Well, I have loved getting to count you as a friend. I know you have been a judge for our either the Franchise of the Year Award or the Community Impact Award. I can't remember which one.
Franchisee.
Franchise of the Year Award. Yeah. So thank you for doing that. But I've been a longstanding listener of the podcast as well. And I started hearing you talk about Zorforum years ago before you were launching it. And so can you kind of tell us about Zorforum and kind of how that started?
Sure. Zorforum is an organization of franchise professionals that have franchised the opportunity for emerging franchisors find comfort in each other as compared to usually being some of the loneliest people on the planet. Emerging zors don't know what they don't know, and they don't know where to go to find out what they need to know. And what we've done is taken the mentality and the idea of a Vistage or an EO or a YPO or peer groups, the power of the peer, and we have filtered it down to the position anyone takes as a member of a Zorforum group can only be because they are a principal in an emerging or a growth-oriented franchise business. You can bring your problems that wake you up at 3 a.m. to a Vistage group, and the other 8 people around that table aren't going to know what you're talking about because they don't know franchising.
Yeah.
But if you're in a group of 6 or 8 or 10 people just like you across different brands, no two people in the same competitive set can sit at the same table because they won't open up with each other. You want people to take deep dives and really talk about what's got them razzled, and so we put them in groups with a structured facilitator who's one of our franchisees, and they meet on a monthly Zoom call for 3 hours a month, and they share with each other through deep dives the things that wake them up at 3 a.m. and won't let them go back to sleep. Before each meeting, everybody has to submit to the moderator what it was that they would want to talk about in a deep dive if they were called upon this month. And so everybody gets those in, and then the franchisee, we call a facilitator or a moderator, looks at all those, finds the common denominators where maybe there's 3 or 4 people in the group that shared something similar, and then he'll determine which one he's going to call on to take the deep dive. The group works together. They listen, they share their feedback, they share ideas, and the person who benefited from the deep dive in any given month might be the one helping someone else with their deep dive in a subsequent month. These groups get very, very closely knit. They get very tight. You know, we both know Diane Davis is a member who I remember hearing her after 4 or 5 months talking about Zorforum. She said, if there's anything I had to give up in any given month for any reason, it would not be this.
Isn't that wonderful? And Diane Davis is the past president of Just Between Friends. And when I heard about Zorforum, I said, hey, do you want to be in this group? And so she was in John Francis's first group and is still in that group. So I want to say, just from a practical standpoint of anyone in franchising, a franchising leader, principal, whatever, I started a group of women in C-level positions in franchising back in 2017. And it now has like 15 or 16 people in that group, that's a really large group. I know yours is smaller in nature, Zorforum, but I can stand before the audience and say it has been a game changer for my leadership. It has been a game changer now for my clients because I have this group. We call ourselves the advanced group, and now we have an emerging group of that. This is, started before Zorforum came to be. But I'm just going to give a plug to Zorforum. If you're not in a group where you have peer-to-peer kind of mentoring, and that's what keeps you up at night, you get to kind of talk to people who are dealing with the same things that you're dealing with. It is just a game changer. And you end up talking about personal stuff as well as business stuff because our personal and our business lives intersect so often. So how many groups do you currently have going, Stan, or how can they get involved in one?
They simply go to zorforum.com.
Okay.
And they can put their name on there for a waiting list. John is setting up his 4th group right now, and Graham's running one, and Eric Mayers is getting ready to start his. So we've got about 5, maybe 6 groups. This year is the coming out year. We've done a lot of work to get to where we are now, and now we're beginning to market and make people aware of us. We just came back from the Fay Gray Franchise Summit where we did an awful lot of showcasing there of what we're doing.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
And these are non-competing. I want to mention that. These are non-competing, so you won't have a competitor in your group.
Correct.
Yeah.
No 2 people from the same competitive set could ever be in the same group.
Well, Tracy and I both have been the beneficiary of being in peer-to-peer mentoring groups. And so we are big believers in this. So thank you for being a pioneer yet again in the space with something that should have happened a long time ago.
To your point, I can't believe it didn't.
I would just say, as someone who's participated in masterminds my entire career, the more you lead, the more you need, right? So, and you said it exactly, Stan, is that leadership is lonely. And so having someone who understands the intricate nature of franchising, I was a franchisee for 25 years, and I really came into this role thinking I knew everything. And in retrospect, I knew nothing about being a franchisor. It's very different being a franchisee to being a franchisor. And so I think that the type of space that you're providing, particularly for emerging brands and for franchise leaders, is really commendable.
I think that the audience would do well to read the founder's story on our website and see how the founders of companies like One-on-One Mobility, Shelf Genie, Tutor Doctor, Soccer Shots, College Homeschooling Jump have all been meeting together for up to 15 years now and literally give themselves praise for a lot of their successes and achievements, but they give each other as much praise for what they've accomplished as a group for the reason why they've hit the high water marks of their personal and professional careers.
All of them. I mean, all of those brands you mentioned are doing really well. And
correct.
Some of them, like,
no coincidence, right?
Correct. Yeah. This is what you're trying to emulate.
So that's the birth. That's where this came from. As Dave Paskin took his exit from One-on-One Mobility, trying to figure out what to do next, it was suggested, why don't you do for the franchise community at large what you've done for us and bring this program out to the market. And along the way, Dave connected with me. I heard about him on my podcast. He made an overture to me and to Graham Chapman. Both Graham had been doing a lot of his marketing for him and said, you guys are fired up about this, and I think we should just do this together. And so 4 years ago, we undertook to do that. And here we are today talking about it.
That's awesome. Well, they're lucky to have your leadership for sure.
And I am as lucky to have theirs.
That's so powerful. Before we wrap, I know Shannon's got some rapid fire questions, just kind of back to that line of talking that we were just having about common denominators. I know on your podcast, you have a feature called Rising Stars in Franchising. And so as you coincide with all of these different leaders, either through Zor Forum or through the podcast, what is the common denominator that you see that really allows folks to rise to the top? Is there something that you see like, that it factor with folks that are really doing well in this space right now?
People that I see that really get where they're going are the ones that don't have self-imposed barriers. They don't have blind spots or blinders. They have one speed. It's called on. And they just put their head down and go. And they don't ask permission. They beg forgiveness. They are driven by their vision and they are driven by their passion. And they'd rather say, I'm sorry, I'll not let that happen again, than to be prevented from trying the next thing they were about to do.
That's awesome. I love that.
Thank you, Stan. So we have come to the end of the podcast, and we have asked previous guests like maybe one question at the end, but we think we're going to start doing some rapid fire questions. And so you are our first guinea pig.
Uh-oh. I always ask people at the end of my podcast, hey, if there's one question I didn't ask you that you wished I did, what would it be? And I get from them good question. Let me think. Now you're going to give me 3.
That's right. And by the way, I like that question, so I might add it. I remember when you asked me that question when I was on your podcast, now that I think about it. So, okay, because this is a leadership podcast, we felt like it would be a good idea to ask our leaders that we have chosen, handpicked to have on this podcast, what is one book, podcast, or resource that you believe every franchise leader should engage?
Well, I can't resist. I mean, I've had a couple of shameless plugs from you already, but I would suggest franchisetodaypodcast.com.
Yeah.
Go check me out there and go wherever you go for podcasts, and you'll find a library that goes back some 14 or 15 years.
I've learned so much on that podcast, Stan, and I just want to thank you so much for continuing to put in the effort, put in the time week after week. It's awesome because I know that I can jump on and every week there's going to be a new guest, either an up-and-comer or someone who is a legacy person in the space that is going to teach me something that I didn't already know. And it's fun to hear other people's stories, founder stories in particular, since that's what I was and am. And introducing us to new supplier partners in the space. And it's been amazing. So thank you for continuing to put the work and effort in. Okay.
Thank you.
Second question. If you could give one piece of advice to someone looking to enter the franchising world, what would it be?
Educate yourself. And there are places that are not self-serving that you can go to safely for a starting point in your search for knowledge. Go to places like Rick Bizio, great franchise guy in Florida, has a website called The Educated Franchisee, and he has tons of resource material there. All of it is very, very good for elementary re-education. Go to the Palm Beach Atlantic University's Titus Franchise Center and look for Dr. John Hayes. Great resource center. He's teaching the only curriculum known to me in the country. Students can graduate with a degree in business and a concentration in franchising.
Yeah, and that's something new that's come up within the last, I mean, I think it's been around for a little while, but I think he put pedal to the metal over the last 5 years.
And even beyond him, the University of Louisville now has a franchise program that you can get resources from, and Ben L'Italian at Georgetown University. So all 4 of those are in the sphere of academia, but they're safe havens. Nobody's trying to sell you anything there. You can get a baseline of information, and from it, then you can take the next steps and go further.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm a product of Ben L'Italian and Georgetown University. That's where I did some of my CFE work, and it was so helpful. So helpful. So thank you for that advice. I would agree. Okay, and the third question, if our audience wants to connect with you, what would be the best way to find you?
Best way to find me would be either on LinkedIn, I'm there all the time, or look me up at sensiblefranchising.com, SENSIBLE franchising. Been using that domain a lot longer than IFA's responsible franchising.
That's awesome.
But there you'll find everything I'm attached to and any and everything that's attached to me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Stan. This has been an amazing several minutes, and I wanted to thank you so much for saying yes when we asked you to be on this podcast.
My pleasure.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure to get to know you better. Thank you so much for your time. Wow, what an amazing conversation we had with our guest, Stan Friedman. My top 3 takeaways were this. Number 1, Stan really emphasized the importance of how to think outside the box. And in doing so, how we can think creatively about drawing attention and, most importantly, drawing sales to our business. Secondly, he talked about how all successful franchisors have one speed, and that is on. And the leaders that he coincides with are driven by vision and passion. And finally, Stan reminded us of the importance of learning, that all leaders are learners. And it's so important that we continue to educate ourselves and surround ourselves with really smart people. So thanks again to Stan for joining us today. So Shannon and I have enjoyed hanging out with you. And just as a reminder, we'd love for you to share this podcast with your friends who are also in the franchising space. We'd also love to hear from you. So drop us a DM on LinkedIn or feel free to send us an email at podcast@jbfsale.com. Tell us what you like. Tell us who you'd like to hear on the podcast. And until next time, franchise leaders, let's go, let's go, let's go.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I enjoyed presenting it to you. But that's a wrap for today. Remember, though, there's plenty more coming in the weeks ahead. Remember, too, to subscribe to Franchise Today wherever you chase podcasts. And I'll be sure to see you back here again next time. Until then, I'm Stan Friedman wishing you the best, the very best of all things franchising, and Franchise Today is out.
Franchise Today is a production of FRM Solutions, providing best-in-class CRM tools to empower relationships with prospective and existing franchisees. Find them online at frmsolutions.com. Join Stan every Wednesday at noon Eastern for another episode of Franchise Today.
When you're part of a military family, you understand sacrifice and support. So at American Public University, we honor your dedication by extending our military tuition savings to your extended family. Parents, spouses, legal partners, siblings, and dependents all qualify for APU's preferred military rate of just $250 per credit hour for undergraduate and master's level programs. American Public University. Value for the whole family. Learn more at apu.apus.edu/military.